Well, we are kicking off a new series today called Emotional Intelligence. There's an old episode of Everybody Loves Raymond where there was some tension in the Barone family, because there was usually tension in the Barone family. But this time the tension was from some of the ladies in the family. Well, Ray wanted to get involved to try to, smooth it out, try to iron things out. And that's when Ray's father, Frank, stopped him. And Frank told him this. Frank said, "Listen to me. This is about feelings. You know anything about feelings? Of course you don't. None of us do. So just sit down, shut up, loosen your pants. What more can we do?" And Frank has a way of just summing it up, doesn't he? Because that sums it up for a whole lot of people. There are a lot of people who don't know anything about feelings. Now, we all have feelings. We all experience feelings. But there are so many people that don't know how to manage their feelings. They don't know how to handle their feelings. There are a lot of people who are physically mature and intellectually mature, but they are not emotionally mature. They have very little emotional intelligence because feelings are hard things. Emotions are difficult things to handle and manage, and there's a lot of people that just don't do it very well. Now, when we're talking about emotional intelligence, understand we are not talking about IQ, the intelligence quotient. We're not talking about IQ. We're talking about EQ, the emotional quotient, emotional intelligence. Here's why this matters, though, because it has been proven that someone who has a very high IQ is probably not going to be as successful as someone who might not be as intelligent, but they have a higher EQ. They have higher emotional intelligence. I mean, to put it simply, emotional intelligence will take you further than simple cognition, than simple intellect. But why are we talking about this at church? Because this is not a business conference, right? It's church. I am a pastor. I'm not a life coach. So why are we talking about it here? Because you hear about success and all this, and that sounds very corporate. You hear emotion, like emotional health, emotional intelligence. That sounds like psychology. You probably think about Sigmund Freud before you think about Jesus Christ. So why would we talk about this here? We'll talk about it here because it requires emotional intelligence to love other people well. And what is our mission? To love people with the love of Christ. But that requires us to understand our own emotions. It requires us to understand how we project our emotions on other people. It requires us to understand their emotions and things that they're dealing with. So if we want to live out the call of love, the great commandment of love, emotional intelligence is not optional. It is required. Dr. Daniel Goleman published what is generally seen as the groundbreaking research in emotional intelligence. He published it in 1995. And he said, for someone who is emotionally intelligent, there's 5 different elements that person is going to have. There's going to be their motivation, their self-awareness, their self-regulation, social skills, and empathy. And this was considered groundbreaking research back in the mid-90s. Like, this is an emotionally intelligent person. He published this in 1995. Here's the thing. Every one of these things has a biblical basis. In a lot of ways, the science of psychology is just now catching up to what the biblical writers said a long, long, long time ago. And that's what we're going to see in this series, that the stuff that Dr. Goleman published, the writers of Scripture already told us. So this is about the gospel. This is about the mission. This is about loving other people well. And so our motivation is the umbrella for this entire series. Our motivation is we want to love, and we want to love people well. That's our mission. That's our motivation. That's the umbrella over all this series, and we're going to talk about the rest of these 4 as we go through the next several weeks. But before we do, let's talk about a working definition of what we're talking about. I can't remember where I found this. I would credit the author if I could. But it's a pretty good definition. EQ, emotional intelligence, is an awareness of my emotions and the ability to manage them, as well as an awareness of the emotions of those around me and the ability to respond to them in helpful ways. Do you see why that would be important as people who follow Christ? Do you see why that would be important as people who want to love other people well? It really matters. It really has everything to do with how well we can love other people. Because Jesus said that is the single greatest command, the command of love. Somebody asked Jesus one time, what is the greatest commandment that God ever gave? Here was his response in Mark 12. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your mind, and with all your strength. Jesus said this is the preeminent command. This is the pinnacle, the most important command, to love God, but not just love God. He said, love God with all that you are. Love God holistically. Love God with your mind, your cognition, your intellect. Love God with your strength, your deeds, the things that you do. Love God with your heart, your emotions. Love God with your soul. Love God with everything that you are. That requires emotional intelligence. But then Jesus said, here's the second greatest command. The second is this: love your neighbor as yourself. There's no commandment greater than these. So the command is to love God and love others. And the way we show our love for God is showing love for others. But that requires us to be emotionally intelligent people. It requires us to have what Dr. Goldman called self-awareness. To put it simply, I have to know myself well before I can love you well. I do. I have to know me. I have to know myself well. I have to understand my emotions. I have to see how my emotions impact you. I have to understand the emotions you are feeling. If I want to love you well, there's an emotional awareness. And especially like me, I have to know myself well if I'm ever going to be able to love you well. Why is it so hard then? Because emotional intelligence, it doesn't come easily. And Jeremiah tells us why. In Jeremiah 17, he said, the heart is deceitful above all things and beyond cure. Who can understand it? There is a mammoth gap, a severe, incredibly severe lack of emotional intelligence in our culture today. I mean, it's not a lack of intellect. It's a lack of emotional maturity, emotional intelligence. Jeremiah tells us why. The heart is deceitful above all things. You hear what Jeremiah is saying here? Your heart's going to lie to you. Your own heart is going to lie to you. My heart is going to lie to me. Our heart, it is deceitful above all things and beyond cure. In other words, there's nothing we can do about it ourselves. You are going to lie to you. I'm going to lie to me. Our own hearts are going to deceive us. You want to know why our culture lacks emotional intelligence? It's right here. Because what are we told by culture? Just follow your heart. Just follow your heart. So we're supposed to follow this thing that is deceitful above all things and beyond cure. That's a recipe for emotional immaturity. That is not going to bring about emotional intelligence. Who can understand it? We don't understand ourselves. You ever do something and you look back and be like, why did I do that? Like, why did I do? I don't have one good reason why I did that, and yet I did that. Why did I do that? Well, if you've ever been there, you're not alone. You're not alone. Think about what the Apostle Paul said in Romans in the New Testament. Paul said, I don't really understand myself. For I want to do what is right, but I don't do it. Instead, I do what I hate. And then skip to verse 18. And I know that nothing good lives in me, that is in my sinful nature. Better translation would be in my flesh. I want to do what is right, but I can't. I want to do what is good, but I don't. I don't want to do what is wrong, but I do it anyway. I don't know about you. I feel seen right now. How about you? I feel seen. I feel recognized. I get this. This is Paul. This is the Apostle Paul, greatest church planter and missionary to ever live, wrote the lion's share of the New Testament, the Apostle Paul said, I don't really understand myself. I know the good stuff I should do, and I don't do it. I know this stuff is wrong, I do it anyway. I don't understand myself. You know why? Because the heart is deceitful above all things and beyond cure. Who can understand it? Not even an apostle. Not even an apostle. And so what Paul tells us is the great irony of self-awareness. Here's the irony of self-awareness. Self-awareness requires us to look outside of ourselves, which I know sounds ironic. It even sounds contradictory. Like, if I want to know me, it makes sense to think I should look at me. If I want to know myself better, I should look deeper inside of me. That's logical. That makes sense. And that would work if sin wasn't part of the equation, but it is. We are so broken that we have a broken view of ourselves. You want to know why the heart is deceitful above all things, beyond cure? You want to know why you don't understand the things that you feel? You don't know why you feel what you feel. You don't know why you think what you think. You don't even know why you do what you do sometimes. You know why? Because sin has broken our view of ourselves. And that means self-awareness is never going to come by just look inside. See, this is what culture tells us, right? Know thyself. You got to know yourself, believe in yourself, just follow your heart. And what will that lead to? Self-actualization. Self-awareness. But it won't. It won't. Because we will lie to ourselves. Our hearts will lie to us. So if we really want to be self-aware, if we really want to know ourselves, we have to look outside of ourselves. And that's the wisdom of Solomon here in Proverbs 3, when he said, trust in the Lord with all of your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In other words, don't depend on your own understanding. Don't look within yourself. Don't trust your own heart. In all your ways, submit to him, submit to God, and he will make your paths straight. Do not be wise in your own eyes. Fear the Lord and shun evil. This will bring health to your body and nourishment to your bones. We will never be healthy. We will never be emotionally healthy if all we do is look inside. And you kind of know that's true, don't you? You kind of know that's true because deep down, you may have never said it out loud, but deep down, you're like, I don't really understand myself. I'm feeling things, but I don't understand what I'm feeling. I have these thoughts, and I don't understand why I'm thinking them. I do things. Why did I do that? Deep down, all of us actually know this is true. Self-awareness comes from outside of ourselves. That's what Tim Keller said. He says, society says our problems come from the outside and solutions come from the inside. The gospel says the opposite. And isn't that true? Isn't that true? Most of our problems are from the inside out. Most of our problems come from the inside. The solution to our problems comes from the outside. The solution being the finished work of Christ on the cross. That's the outside solution for health and hope and healing, and it's something we're never going to find by just follow your heart. Just believe in yourself. Self-awareness comes from outside of ourselves. And that's why Solomon in Proverbs 27 said, wounds from a friend can be trusted, but an enemy multiplies kisses. I love this proverb because this has played out to be true so many times in my own life. I have lived this. A real friend, a true friend, is not just going to multiply kisses. In other words, a real friend is not just going to tell you the stuff you want to hear. They're not just going to tell you stuff because they know it's what you want to hear. They are willing to tell you the truth that you need to hear, even if that truth wounds you, even if it hurts. Even if it's a difficult, hard conversation, that friend is willing to wound you. And you can trust that wound. You can trust that hurt because you can trust the source. It came from someone who is a friend. It came from someone who loves you and legitimately wants what's best for you. All right? We're not talking about somebody you don't know on social media who blasts off at you. Don't pay them. They don't deserve an ounce of your attention. We're talking about friends who love you, who really, truly want the best for you. So much so that they are willing to be in an awkward position. They're willing to have a hard conversation. They're willing to tell you what you don't want to hear because it's what you need to hear. Here's the question. Do you have someone in your life who knows they have permission to do that? Do you have someone in your life that has permission, and they know they have permission to wound you if that's what you need? Most people would say no. I don't have that person in my life. Which is why so many people live with such a lack of emotional intelligence, because self-awareness comes from outside of ourselves. It doesn't just come from yes men and yes women. It comes from people who are willing to tell us the hard truth when that's what we need. Who has permission to tell you these things? Anybody? Who has permission to answer questions like this? What's it like to be on the other side of me? It's questions from Jeff Henderson, and I love the way he phrases it, because if you and I ask this question, and we have people in our lives who will honestly answer this question, it's like Miracle-Gro on our self-awareness, like Miracle-Gro on our emotional intelligence. What's it like to be on the other side of me? I used to work with a guy one time that dude just changed the atmosphere when he walked in the room. You know, like if I'm at work and I hear the door open, I don't even turn around, but if I know he walked in, my stomach immediately knotted up. I was immediately tense. I was immediately uncomfortable. It's like the air in the room changed when the guy walked in. And the thing is, you know what I'm talking about because you know those people, right? You know those people where they walk in and the air changes. So, for good or bad, some's positive, some is negative, but they walk in and there is an atmosphere that comes with them. Like, you know the atmosphere when your boss walks in. You know the atmosphere when your husband or wife gets home. You know the atmosphere when that friend of yours walks into a gathering. Because people come with an atmosphere. People have a climate. People have a climate, just like places have a climate. You know, if I told you the climate of Toronto is different from the climate of Miami, you understand that. Like, yes, different places have different climates. Organizations, businesses have a climate. For example, the climate of Taco Bell is different from the climate of Chick-fil-A. And that's all I have to say. I don't have to tell you anything else. The climate of Taco Bell is different from the climate of Chick-fil-A, and you immediately know what I'm talking about because you've been to both places. You've experienced both climates. You know what that means. Well, different places have a climate. Organizations and businesses have a climate. People have a climate. There's a forecast that follows people around. When you see someone coming, some people bring a ray of sunshine, some people bring thunderstorms. Some people bring peace, some people bring an uneasy feeling, some people bring chaos. Here's the question: what's your climate? What is your atmosphere? What's it like to be on the other side of you? What is it? What's it like to be your spouse? What's it like to be your child? What's it like to be your coworker? What's it like to be your friend? What do people think when they see you coming? Or they see your name pop up, on a text message. I mean, there are people, like, I get a text and I look at my phone and I see their name. I'm going to open it immediately. Yep, good. I want to hear from them. There are other people, their name pops up on a text or an email. First thought that runs through my mind, oh, crap. Well, I don't know this could go either way. I don't know. What do you think when people see your name pop up? What do they think? What's your climate? What atmosphere follows you? What if you woke up tomorrow and you were married to you? Would you be happy? Devastated? What if you had to work with you? Would you look forward to going into work every day? Would you think about putting in your 2 weeks? What's it like? to be on the other side of me? And do you have anybody in your life who will give you an honest answer to the question? Because that's where self-awareness truly comes from outside of ourselves. Jennifer Kwame lists some red flags, some warning signs that we need to grow in our emotional intelligence. And the reason I wanted to share this list, and it's not an exhaustive list by any means, but the reason I wanted to share this list is because I've lived out almost every single one of them. I've been looking forward to this series for so long because I know how important it is. Because when I look back, when I first came to Connect, way back when, I thought I was ready. I thought I was ready to be a lead pastor. I'd had other church staff positions in other churches, but I thought I was ready to be a lead pastor. And maybe I was in some ways. Some ways, intellectually, I probably was ready. It doesn't mean you don't keep learning things. I want to keep learning, but I was probably ready intellectually. No way in the world I was ready emotionally. No way. I was not ready for the emotions that were waiting for me in this job. Not even close. I wasn't ready for the emotional baggage of hearing the hurts and the heartache, the trouble and the trial, the problems and the pain of hundreds of people. I was not ready for that weight. I have later found out that most pastors in their 40s and 50s experience something akin to PTSD. It's called pastoral PTSD, and it's a real thing. And it's just because of the amount of hurt, the amount of sorrow, the amount of pain, the amount of grief pastors are involved in all the time. And by the time they hit their 40s and 50s, there's something akin to PTSD that shows up. Well, I get that, only it didn't wait till my 40s or 50s. It hit me in my 30s because I wasn't ready. Wasn't ready for those emotions. I wasn't ready for the emotions of being betrayed. I wasn't ready for the emotions of knowing people are gossiping about me. I wasn't ready for the emotion of people hating me. And I mean hate, capital H, capital A. People hate me. I was very naive. I was young. I was naive when I walked in. Everybody likes the pastor, right? No, they don't. No, they don't. And I wasn't ready for that. I wasn't ready for the best laid plans to come to nothing. I would work and dream and plan and pray, and I was absolutely convinced this is what we're supposed to do, and this is where God is leading, and it goes nowhere. It completely implodes. Was not ready for that. There was an emotional cocktail waiting for me in this job that I was in no way ready for. And it blows my mind that I still have this job, considering how I started this job. Because a lot of what Jennifer Kwame talks about, this was me. See if you see yourself in any of the things she lists. These are some signs that some growth in emotional intelligence is needed. If people are always offended by the things that you say and things that you do. Now see, this is when a lot of people want to push back and say, hey, it's how it is. I'm blunt. I'm brutally honest. And everybody's so sensitive today. Everybody's all offended about everything. Everybody's a snowflake today. Okay, maybe. Or maybe you're just a jerk face. That's a plausible explanation too, right? Maybe that's it. If people are always angry and offended by what you say and what you do, the problem probably isn't everybody else. If you can't handle any constructive criticism without immediately getting defensive, somebody gives you any feedback at all and phew, shields go up, claws come out, you are immediately on the defense. That's a sign that there's some emotional growth that needs to happen there. If you would describe most of your relationships as stressful and draining rather than happy and healthy, most of your relationships are not supposed to be stressors. They're not supposed to be sources of things that just sap you, just drain you, suck the life out of you. If most of your relationships are stressful and draining, and if you can't identify and resolve the issues that led to those relationships, the problem might not be the other people in the relationships. The problem might be the person in the mirror. The person in the mirror might lack self-awareness, might lack emotional intelligence. If you blame everyone for all your problems, always, if you are the perpetual victim, it's never your fault. It's always somebody else's fault. That is a sure sign that you need to grow in your EQ. When I look back on my first days here at Connect, I see myself all over this. I was not in any way emotionally prepared for this. I was so emotionally immature. I was an emotional moron, and it showed. It showed. It showed in how I treated people. It showed in how I would isolate myself. It showed in how I responded to criticism. It showed in how I preached. I mean, it showed. That if you go to, connect.cc or go to our Connect app, our sermon videos are there. We upload sermon videos there every week. But the sermon library only goes back so far. And there's multiple reasons why. But one big reason is I don't ever want those old sermons to see the light of day ever again. I mean, I still have them. I still have them all. I still have them, but you will never hear them. Ever. Because when I look back on those first messages that I preached here, I'm telling you, the kid that was preaching those messages was so emotionally stupid that he had no idea how his messages were received and perceived. I look back and I sound like an arrogant jerk. I was condescending. I was arrogant. I did and said things on stage just to shock people, and that's all. Like language I would use, things I would do. I did it just for the shock value. And somehow wore it as like this holy badge of honor. I'm going to shock all these church people. Watch what I can do. Why would you do that? Because I can. I would manipulate people's emotions when I preached, just because I could. I was not ready. It, again, amazes me. It amazes me that I still have this job when I think of how I started this job. That's a lot of the reason why. I am in every one of those when I look back. How much of yourself do you see in these? Now, I do have some good news for you. If you're like, well, what do I do about it? Here's the difference between IQ and EQ. IQ, the intelligence quotient, IQ is pretty much set in your teenage years. Pretty much. I mean, you can always learn new things, but your IQ is generally set in your teenage years. For some of you, that's not that good news. That's not really good news, right? Like, you hear that, and like, that's kind of depressing. And I get it, because I don't think it's great news for me. Your IQ is pretty much set in your teenage years, but EQ is different, because EQ is learned. EQ can change. No matter who you are, no matter how old you are, you can grow in your emotional intelligence, because it's a discipline. It's a learned thing. So there is always hope that we can grow and we can change. But here's why this matters most of all. We care about being self-aware because being self-aware helps us care. What did Jesus say is our primary mission? Love. Love God and love others. To care for others with the same love that God has shown to us. That's why we care about this stuff. We care about being self-aware because being self-aware helps us care. I can love you better if I know myself better. The more self-aware I am, the better I can love and care for you. And I have by no means arrived in my personal life, but I have grown so much from those early days in my EQ. And the reason is I have people in my life who know they have permission to call me out. They have permission to wound me if that's what I need. Like if I'm overreacting to a situation, they have permission to tell me that. If I need to see things from a different perspective, they have permission to tell me that. because self-awareness comes from outside of ourselves. And I am a better pastor today. I preach better. I lead better. I pastor better. I love better because of those people, because they have enabled me to grow in my emotional intelligence. That's why we care about this stuff. We care about being self-aware because being self-aware helps us care. And that's the wisdom of Solomon in Proverbs 19. Listen to advice and accept discipline, and at the end, you will be counted among the wise. Self-awareness comes from outside ourselves. Listen to advice. Accept discipline. In other words, listen to people who love you tell you things you don't want to hear. And if you do, and by the way, they won't always tell you the bad stuff. They'll tell you the good stuff too. But here's the thing about that. The good stuff means more coming from them because they'll also tell you the bad stuff. Means a lot more. But if we listen to advice, if we accept discipline, we will be at home among the wise. And this is one of the greatest differences between IQ and EQ. IQ is about intelligence. EQ is about wisdom. Intelligence and wisdom are not the same thing. They are not the same thing. IQ is just about cognition, just about our intellect. EQ, emotional intelligence, is all about wisdom. And we have never needed wisdom more in our culture than we need it right now. We need wisdom because wisdom coming from the emotional health perspective, just think about the culture we live in. Think about society right now. Everything is emotional. Everything. The emotional thermostat is cranked as high as it will go always. Everything is hyper emotional. And so think about what this means. This means that every experience has to be the greatest experience ever. Has to be. Like you go out to dinner, it's got to be the greatest dinner ever. Go on vacation, it's got to be the greatest trip ever. If it's not the greatest ever, then it must be the worst ever. How foolish is that? 99% of life lies somewhere in the middle. 99% of life is like, that's not the greatest thing ever, and it's not the worst thing ever. But that nuance is lost on a culture where things are cranked to 11 all the time. Everything is hyper emotional, and it seeps into every single part of our lives. I mean, just think about it this way. Every election, what are we told before every single election? This is the most important election of our lifetime. Every time. Every issue is the most important issue ever. Every battle is the most important battle ever. And if someone disagrees with me on one thing, that person is my enemy and they must be destroyed. It's chaos. Our culture emotionally is off the rails. The people of God need to be people of wisdom, people who wisely know how to turn the temperature down, to bring a wise and calming influence to a culture that's lost its flipping mind. This is EQ. This is about wisdom. It's about wisdom regarding our emotions. We care about being self-aware because being self-aware helps us care. It helps us love people who are in an emotional free-for-all. It's just a frenzy of emotions, and they don't understand any of it. They just project and project and project. Everybody's angry all the time, right? Angry all the time. Scroll Twitter if you don't believe me. Everybody's mad all the time. Why? Because the heart is deceitful above all things and beyond cure. Who can understand it? That's why everybody's mad all the time. That's why everything is emotional. That's why it's cranked to 11 all day, every day. How do we love people that are caught up in this emotional storm and they don't even realize it? We start with being self-aware, knowing our own emotions, managing our own emotions. And that's going to enable us to love other people who their emotions are off the rails, out of control. It's going to help us love them better. We care about being self-aware because being self-aware helps us care. It helps us love better. It makes us better representatives of Christ. It makes our witness better. We can love people and point them to a God who loved them enough to give his life for them on the cross. We can do that the more we grow in self-awareness, because here's something else self-awareness does. Self-awareness is the death of self-righteousness. What is one thing that people hate about the church, hate about Christians? Self-righteousness. This pompous, arrogant, holier-than-thou attitude, it's pervasive in the American church, and it's one of the things people hate most about the church. Here's what self-awareness does. It is the death of self-righteousness, because if I know myself well, I am very attuned to my own brokenness. I am very well aware of my own shortcomings and my own flaws and my own failures and my own sin and self-right. There's no way I can be self-righteous if I am self-aware. The two cannot coexist. So when I'm truly self-aware, what is it going to do? It's going to drive me closer and closer to Jesus, because healing and health and hope have to come from outside of me. If it has to come from inside of me, I'm toast. I'm done. I'm screwed. It's over. Self-awareness drives me to the healing and the health and the wholeness that's found outside of me. It's found in the finished work of Christ on the cross. And not only does that improve our walk with Christ, but it makes it a lot more attractive to other people, because all of a sudden, I'm not drawing people to me. I'm not saying, look at me, because you know what I can get you? Nothing. If you follow Mike Edmiston to the grave, you know what that earns you? A cut in line to hell. That's it. But it points people to Jesus, who really can do something, not just in their eternity, but in their life here and now. Because what do we say at Connect all the time? It's all about Jesus. The more self-aware I am, the more it becomes all about Jesus. Let me pray for us.